black woman was denied her first-class seat, even though she had a ticket, even though her name was on the list, even though she arrived right on time. The gate agent looked her up and down and said, "You'll need to step aside. This seat is for important passengers." 17 minutes later, the entire gate staff had been suspended. Not because she yelled, not because she threw a scene, but because she tapped into something deeper. Who is this woman? Who can freeze a whole airport with just one nod? Who has the kind of quiet power that doesn't shout but shifts the room? You're about to hear a story that starts like another case of discrimination, but ends as the most quietly powerful statement of the year. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The terminal air was stale with recirculated chatter and coffee breath. Gate C11 had the usual Monday morning rush, wheels clacking over tile, business suits brushing past diaper bags, and a tired agent announcing boarding groups into a faulty PA system. Group 1 had just been called. Ellena Grace Holloway stepped forward, rolling a small black carry-on with one hand, her other holding a boarding pass. She wore a charcoal gray sweater dress, gold-rimmed glasses, and flats polished to a mirror shine. Nothing flashy, just simple, clean. Decades of being underestimated had taught her, let them think you're invisible. That's when you're most powerful. She reached the boarding gate, presented her pass. The scanner gave a soft beep, green, but before she could take a step down the jet bridge, a voice stopped her cold. "Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong line." Ellena turned. The gate agent had a plastic smile on her face and a tone dipped in something just a bit too sweet to be neutral. "I'm sorry?" Ellena said. The woman, Tasha Monroe, according to her name tag, eyed her from head to toe, then tilted her chin toward the sign overhead. Her tone was gentle. "Yeah, ma'am. You'll see when you get here. I'm going to type in the sign overhead." "This section's for our first-class executives only," she said, louder this time. "Boarding for main cabin hasn't started yet." Ellena glanced back at the scanner. It was still glowing green. "I'm aware," she said calmly. "I'm seat 2A. Tasha's smile thinned. "May I see that again?" Ellena held out the pass. Tasha didn't take it. She just looked long enough to read the name and seat assignment, then longer than she needed to. Pause. Then came the line that would split that day in two. "Ma'am," she said, tucking the boarding pass under the scanner again without asking, "this section is for executives only." It wasn't the words, it was the emphasis, as if executives had a smell, and Ellena didn't fit. Elena's face remained still as stone, but behind her glasses her eyes blinked once. Slowly. The passengers behind her started to form a short line. A white man in a Patagonia vest checked his watch. A woman with AirPods in shifted her weight. Tasha didn't move. Ellena didn't either. There was no raised voice, no complaint. Just a stare that had lasted through 40 years of being dismissed in boardrooms, of being the only black woman in every elevator that went to the top floor, of learning exactly how long silence needed to last before it demanded respect. Tasha glanced around, then tapped her tablet with 2 fingers. "I don't see your name in the active first-class manifest," she said. "Are you sure you didn't get upgraded by mistake? Sometimes that happens automatically." Ellena raised one brow. "I purchased my seat," she said, 3 weeks ago." "Right," Tasha said. "But sometimes people get confused when booking. You may have selected Premium Select by accident." "I did not." Now there were murmurs behind them. A young man in row 5C lifted his phone. A woman in group 3 leaned over to the person beside her. "Why's she being stopped?" the woman asked. "She scanned in." "Maybe she's trying to sneak into first," the other whispered. "You know how they do." The crowd wasn't just watching now. It was studying, documenting, and yet no one said a word in her defense. Ellena stood, spine tall, fingers relaxed at her sides. She didn't flinch. She didn't frown. She waited. The silence stretched. That's when a man's voice cut through the tension. Light, casual, confident. "Let me handle this, sweetheart." Craig Delano always arrived like he was stepping onto a golf course, khaki slacks with too much starch, a navy blazer with epaulette-style shoulder tabs, and a voice that walked the line between southern charm and corporate arrogance. He was the kind of man who'd call a woman darling in a meeting and think it was polite. He stepped forward from the customer service desk, flashing an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, nodding slightly to Ellena. "Let's not make a scene over a seating mix-up, all right? Happens all the time. Real easy fix." Ellena didn't respond. She simply handed him the same boarding pass Tasha had doubted moments earlier. Craig glanced at it, then back at her, then chuckled. "Well now, 2A, huh?" he said. "That's first class all right, though I think we both know that's a little unexpected, don't we?" He said it with a wink, like they were sharing a joke. They weren't. "I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago," Ellena repeated, her voice smooth as velvet but with an undertone that suggested steel. "I hear you," Craig said, "but here's the thing, sometimes our system upgrades folks by accident and they don't realize they've actually booked economy. It's an easy mistake, really." He smiled again. "But no worries, we've got some great seats in Premium Select, much more spacious than main cabin." The implication hung in the air like bad cologne. Ellena looked him in the eye. "I'm not mistaken?" "Of course," Craig said, nodding sympathetically. "But still, why don't we take care of this at the service desk, Em? That way we don't hold up the rest of our travelers." Behind her, the line was getting longer. A few passengers checked their watches. One or two sighed dramatically, but no one said a word. They were waiting to see what the black woman would do. Would she yell, cry, comply? Ellena did none of those things. She didn't move an inch. Instead, she lowered her voice and asked, "Would you like to verify the transaction history?" Craig hesitated. "Well, that's a little above my access level," he admitted. "But no need for that. We'll get you sorted." "Mr. Delano," she said, reading his name tag. "Please don't sort me. Please verify me." He blinked. Something about the way she said it, calm, measured, like she wasn't asking, made his smile falter for half a breath. Tasha cleared her throat from behind the desk. "Should I call over a supervisor?" she asked. Craig didn't answer her. Instead, he turned back to Ellena. "You're not making this easy, ma'am." "No," Ellena said, "but I'm making it clear." At that moment, the scanner at the boarding gate glitched and beeped again. The green light flashed once more. It was still active, still valid, but the line had stopped moving. Passengers were stacking up behind her, and not one voice had risen to defend her. That was the most familiar part of all. "Is she really arguing over a seat?" someone whispered. The voice came from midway down the line, barely above a murmur, but loud enough to travel. "She's holding everyone up." More murmurs followed. A teenage girl pulled out her phone and turned on the camera. Low, discreet, angled upward just enough to catch Ellena and Craig in frame. The red recording light blinked silently. A middle-aged white woman in a designer scarf leaned toward the man beside her. "She probably meant to book economy," she said under her breath. "I mean, look at her shoes." A man in a crisp blazer with a carry-on monogrammed HRL gave a quiet chuckle. "Reminds me of that lady in Denver who thought a TSA pre-check pass meant she owned the airport." Even with phones recording, no one said this isn't right. No one asked to see her pass again. No one questioned Craig's dismissive tone or Tasha's assumptions. They simply waited, watched, and judged. Ellena didn't flinch. She looked from one face to another, each pretending not to stare but doing little else. And then, a soft voice from behind her. "She's handling this with more grace than I ever could." It came from an older black woman seated near the boarding area, her travel pillow still looped around her neck. Her voice wasn't loud, It didn't need to be. Ellena didn't turn toward her, but her fingers relaxed slightly at her side. A few rows down, Jaden Watts, hoodie half-zipped, AirPods in, was already typing. He had one tab open to the airline's app, another open to Google, and a third one, Twitter. The video he'd started uploading had already been watched over 100 times. He typed a simple caption, "Why does this keep happening? She showed her ticket, first class, paid, and they're still acting like she doesn't belong." Then he added one last line, just a thought. This feels like it's about more than a seat." He hesitated a second, then hit post. A push notification buzzed on his screen almost instantly. One new follower, then another, then 6 more. Jaden looked up again. Something about this woman felt different, controlled, like she knew something the others didn't. The rest of the line, still watching, still silent, still seated. Ellena inhaled through her nose. Once, steady, then she looked down at her wrist. The time read 11:11. She pressed her thumb to the side of her watch. The face lit up. She tapped once, then reached calmly into her handbag and retrieved her phone. No rush, no drama. She scrolled for a name. Julian Scott. EVP, she tapped. It rang once, twice, then picked up. "Julian," she said quietly. "It's me." A pause. She turned slightly away from the gate, just enough for privacy, but not so far that Craig or Tasha couldn't hear her speak. "Yes," she said. "Initiate protocol. Internal. Tier 1. Another pause. "Effective immediately." She hung up, put the phone back into her bag, turned around, and smiled. Not at anyone, just at the air between her and the scanner. Craig narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, is there someone else we should be expecting?" Ellena tilted her head. "No, but I imagine someone else might be expecting you." He looked at Tasha. She shrugged, confused. Behind them, the flight information monitor updated. A red line blinked briefly across the corner. But no one saw it, except Jaden, who had been watching the gate screen instead of the drama. He leaned forward, squinting. "That's weird," he thought. The gate ID had just refreshed. And the words underneath now read, "Operational review in progress, stand by." No flight number, no departure time, just that. Jaden looked back at the woman in gray. She wasn't doing anything. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't demanding, but somehow everyone else had gotten quieter. Even the air felt different, and Ellena, she just waited. "Excuse me, what's the delay?" A man in a business suit stepped out of line. He wasn't angry, not yet, but his voice carried the weight of a tight connection and a low tolerance for inconvenience. Tasha turned quickly, forcing a polite tone. "We're just sorting out a seat verification issue," she said. "Boarding will resume momentarily." The man looked past her, straight at Ellena, then at Craig, then back again. It didn't take much to connect the dots. "You're holding up the plane because of her?" he asked. Craig straightened. "Sir, we're doing our best to ensure all passengers are in their correct seat assignments." Before he could finish, the overhead speaker clicked on. A voice, flat, professional, came through. "Attention passengers at gate C11. Boarding for flight 261 has been temporarily paused. Please remain in the gate area. Thank you for your patience." A beat of stunned silence. Then murmurs. Jaden looked up from his phone again. Now even the loudest travelers had quieted. Phones were everywhere now. Some recording, others silently watching. The display screen at the boarding counter refreshed again. The flight number vanished, replaced by internal operational audit, male, active. Tasha blinked at the screen. "What the hell is going on?" she whispered. Craig stepped behind the counter, jabbing at the tablet. "Systems frozen," he muttered. "Flights locked, manifests inaccessible. What kind of update is this?" Behind him, one of the security staff at the far corner of the terminal turned to check the PA console. No one had called the announcement in. It came from somewhere else. And Ellena? She hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. She simply stood, holding her boarding pass, her carry-on still by her feet. Craig's voice dropped to a hiss. "Who is she?" No one answered him. Not yet. But Jaden had already started typing again. Not for a caption this time, just a line of thought, almost a whisper under his breath. This might be the part where things flip. The quiet didn't feel natural. It didn't feel earned. It felt forced. Like someone had put a hand over the airport's mouth. Passengers at gate C11 shifted in their seats, glancing around for someone to blame. The screen behind the counter still pulsed with that strange message. Internal operational audit active. No flight number, no destination. Just those words, holding everyone in a kind of limbo. An older couple sitting by the window clutched their boarding passes tighter, as if the delay might take them too. A little boy asked his mother if the plane was broken. And at the center of it all stood the woman in the gray dress. Still, unmoved, unapologetic. Craig had stepped away from the counter now, pacing just behind the row of monitors. He was on the phone, voice low but sharp. Every few seconds he glanced over at Ellena like she might explode if he looked away too long. "She's not even saying anything," Tasha muttered. Camille Evans, the security officer posted near the escalators, walked over slowly. Her boots made soft, even clicks on the tile. She had seen enough incidents at this terminal to recognize when something was off. But this felt different. "Everything all right?" she asked, looking at Tasha. "Fine," Tasha said too fast. Camille studied her face, then looked at Ellena. The woman looked back, direct, calm, present. Camille spoke again, quieter this time. "Did she raise her voice? Refuse to comply?" "No," Tasha said, "but she just doesn't belong in that seat." Camille paused, blinked once. "What do you mean?" "I mean she—" Tasha hesitated. "She doesn't look the part." Camille didn't answer. But her eyes lingered on Ellena, then on the frozen scanner, then on the screen that refused to show a destination. Across the gate area, Jaden had opened another tab on his phone. He typed Ellena Holloway into the search bar. A partial autofill suggested Ellena Holloway, CEO. He clicked. A profile loaded, Forbes magazine, dated 6 months ago. The quiet powerhouse. How Ellena Holloway bought half the airport you're standing in. Jaden's eyes widened. He turned slowly, looking at her again. She hadn't moved. She hadn't needed to. The crowd was doing the work for her. Someone near the windows whispered, "Is she famous?" "I think I've seen her before." "Wait. Isn't she on some board?" Camille's radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice came through, clipped and tense. "Command, notice to all floor managers. Terminal C is under ownership verification. Repeat, C terminal operations locked, pending review." Camille stared at her radio like it had lied to her. Tasha looked up sharply. "What the hell is ownership verification?" Craig reappeared, face pale. "No idea," he said, "but someone high up just got bumped off a call with the FA." Silence again. Ellena reached into her bag and retrieved a small leather wallet. She wasn't waving it around, just holding it. Inside, a single card glinted under the overhead light. Camille's eyes narrowed. It wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a boarding pass. It was a vendor-level access card. Something she'd only seen once before, when a Department of Transportation official did a surprise audit last year. Camille stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "do you work with the airport authority?" Elena's gaze met hers. "I own part of it," she said with perfect clarity. Then she slid the card back into her wallet, zipped her bag, and turned once more to face the boarding gate. The line of passengers behind her hadn't moved in 10 minutes. But now, no one dared ask her to.
7:12 I.M. sharp.
The second hand on Elena's watch landed directly on the hour marker, like it had been waiting. She checked the time, just briefly, then pulled her phone from her handbag again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She dialed. Not a number from memory, not from contacts. She used a voice shortcut. "Call Julian Scott, priority line." The phone responded without a beep. It rang. Once. Twice. Then, "Yes?" said the voice on the other end. Male, steady, ready. "It's Ellena," she said. Julian didn't ask why she was calling. He only asked, "Do we need the full protocol?" "Yes." "How far?" Her voice didn't rise, not even a little. "All the way through terminal shutdown. Start with gate C11, notify TSA facilities, vendor relations, pull the real-time audit team, no press. Yet?" "Understood." The call ended. No more than 15 seconds. And Ellena tucked her phone away like nothing had happened. Just as she zipped her bag, Craig's voice returned, this time half-panicked, speaking into his own phone behind the counter. "I don't care what the system says, Javier, it's a glitch. We've got passengers stuck here and no manifest access. You need to get IT to—" "Wait, what do you mean it's not our system?" He turned around and locked eyes with Ellena. She was standing still, hands clasped in front of her, calm as ever. But his stomach turned. Whatever was happening was coming from above him. A voice behind him, another gate agent, muttered, "Did corporate send someone? I thought surprise audits were only for baggage handling." Camille's radio crackled again. "Security update. Initiate Gate C lockdown protocol. Confirm perimeter scan. Cross-verify boarding systems with vendor override key." She raised her eyebrows. Vendor override? The only time she'd ever heard that term used was in relation to stakeholders, high-level ones. Craig barked into the radio at someone invisible. "We don't need a lockdown. We just need boarding resumed." But then the lights flickered, just once, and the entire boarding system rebooted. The screen over gate C11 went black for 3 seconds, then returned, now with a new message. Terminal access suspended. Stakeholder verification pending. Camille stared at it. So did everyone else. Craig barked at it. So did everyone else. Tasha, arms crossed now, voice low, whispered, "Is this her doing?" No one answered, but Jaden was still typing. He'd found a second article now. Ellena G. Holloway expands transportation influence with strategic acquisition of Concourse West Management. And beneath that, with the purchase, Holloway's holding company now owns or controls leasing rights at over a dozen U.S. airports. He read the headline again, then looked up, and understood. This wasn't some angry customer. This was the system calling itself into question, and the woman leading it hadn't raised her voice once. Jaden Watts didn't usually pay attention at the gate. Airports were just background noise to him, a place to charge his phone, finish class readings, and zone out before takeoff. But something about this morning had him fully alert. The scanner, the woman, the silence that wasn't really silence. And now, that screen. He stared at the message still glowing above the counter. Stakeholder verification pending. That wasn't normal. He'd flown enough to know the difference between technical delay and this. Jaden pulled his hoodie tighter and tapped the screen on his phone. He had one live stream up, not his. Someone else in the waiting area had already started broadcasting. The video quality was grainy, but the comment section wasn't. Why is she still standing there? Didn't she prove she had a seat? Why aren't they saying who she is? Wait, y'all, someone just posted a link. He clicked it. It took him to an article, a business journal piece from 2 years ago. There she was, same face, same presence. Ellena Grace Holloway, CEO of Holloway Strategic Holdings. His stomach flipped. "Oh, damn," he said under his breath. The woman being asked to move back to economy wasn't just a CO. She was the CO, a billionaire. Not just a shareholder, she owned the company that owned the vendor that ran parts of this airport. Jaden didn't say anything. He just tilted his phone slightly, letting the girl beside him see the headline. She gasped softly, then passed it to the man beside her. Within 30 seconds, a small row of passengers had read it, and every single one looked toward Ellena at the same time. She was still at the gate, still not speaking, still waiting. Behind the counter, Craig was sweating now. He kept checking his tablet like it would unfreeze if he tapped harder. His phone buzzed. Again, then again. He answered once, didn't say a word, just listened, then hung up. Jaden watched him. That was the face of a man realizing he had miscalculated, and badly. Camille, the security officer, wasn't pacing. She wasn't even blinking much, just watching Ellena with new eyes, not as a subject of conflict, but as someone who had walked into a place she already owned. Jaden refreshed the live stream. The viewer count had doubled in the last 10 minutes, then tripled. The comments came fast now. Who is she? Wait, this woman owns part of the terminal? They're trying to kick a CEO off her own infrastructure? No way! That's wild. Jaden leaned forward and whispered to no one in particular. She didn't come here to fly. The girl beside him turned. What? She came here to flip the switch. The camera was no longer just in Jaden's hand. Now there were 3 live streams running from Gate C11. One from a college student, one from a mother of 2, and one from a man in a pilot's uniform who wasn't even flying that day, just waiting to deadhead home. All 3 were broadcasting to hundreds, then thousands, and Ellena still hadn't moved. She didn't need to. The airport was moving for her. Inside the terminal's operations office, 3 screens blinked red. One assistant manager turned to another. Did we authorize a stakeholder audit? No, came the answer, but someone upstairs did. Look, there's a Tier 1 code override in the gate control system. Another leaned in. Who the hell has Tier 1 access? Only silence answered. Then, well, she does. Back at the gate, Craig was losing control. Tasha, he said, voice hushed but sharp, do you have any idea who she is? I thought she was just a difficult passenger, Tasha whispered, eyes wide. She's not. She's the one who signed our vendor contract last fiscal quarter. She is the audit. They both turned to look at her. Ellena had now taken a seat near the counter, calm, still holding her briefcase in her lap. Her bag sat beside her like it belonged there, and it did. Camille approached her slowly, cautiously. Miss Holloway, she said, finally using the name she'd found on the override board. Ellena looked up, cool and composed. Yes. I'd like to request your guidance on how best to proceed. It wasn't sarcasm, it wasn't defiance, it was respect. Ellena simply nodded. I suggest you inform the rest of your team that a stakeholder-led operational review is in effect, and remind them, she added, that live streams are active. Camille turned back to Craig. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Across the terminal, security staff were whispering, watching. Someone was typing fast on a tablet. A supervisor on the other side of the glass partition began pulling up video feeds. And the flight board above the gate? It changed again. All boarding paused. Operational hold by order of stakeholder oversight. No one in line spoke. No one moved. Passengers sat down, slowly, quietly, like the gravity in the room had shifted and they couldn't stand anymore. Jaden's stream was past 3,200 viewers. One comment read, "This is history happening in real time." Another, "This woman just shut down a gate without yelling, without cursing, without raising a hand." One more, "What's her name? I need to know her name." Jaden typed back, "Ellena Grace Holloway," then added, "And she's not just flying today, she's fixing what's broken, midair." At exactly 11:17 a.m., the humming lights over Gate C11 flickered once more. It wasn't a power outage, it was a reset. A system command timed to the second. On the master control screens in airport operations, new language appeared across all terminals. Command sequence activated. Holloway Oversight Tier 1 confirmed. And beneath that, all affected staff, please remain at assigned locations pending instructions. Do not attempt overrides. This is not a drill. Craig's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't reach for it. He already knew who it was, or more accurately, what it was. Ellena stood up. Calmly, deliberately. Tasha looked at her like she was seeing a ghost. Camille stepped slightly to the side as if clearing a path without being asked. Ellena walked to the podium where Craig had been standing just minutes earlier. She didn't need a mic. She didn't raise her voice, but every person within the radius of Gate C11 heard her clearly. "I appreciate your patience," she said. "What you are witnessing is not a disruption. It's a correction." Murmurs rippled across the crowd like a wave. She continued, "For those wondering, yes, my company holds operational oversight for this terminal, and when oversight is ignored, it activates internal protocols designed to reset systems that no longer function with integrity." Craig opened his mouth. Ellena held up a single finger. He stopped. 17 minutes ago, she said, I was asked to move out of a seat I paid for, not because of policy, but because of perception. She looked directly at Tasha, then at Craig. I am no longer interested in perception. She turned slightly, gesturing toward Camille. Officer Evans, would you please assist me in delivering immediate notices of reassignment? Camille blinked, then nodded. Ellena stepped forward again, her tone still measured but sharp as a blade in silk. And for those of you still uncertain about what authority I hold, she reached into her briefcase, pulled out a black folder, opened it. Inside a single-page document, Holloway Strategic Holdings, Tier 1 Oversight Activation Concourse C, signed by 2 federal agencies, stamped by 3, time-stamped 11:11 a.m. Effective immediately, Ellena said. Gate C11 is under direct audit supervision. Boarding is suspended. All personnel involved in the earlier engagement are to step aside. She paused. Let the silence land. Let the weight of it settle. Then she delivered the line that would echo on live streams across boardrooms and in-flight staff trainings for years to come. From this moment forward, I am the one giving instructions. AMM. AMM. Craig hadn't moved. Not an inch. Not since the words left Elena's mouth. From this moment forward, I am the one giving instructions. But it wasn't just what she said. It was how. No one questioned her. Not security, not passengers, not even airport command. Camille now stood beside Ellena, not behind her. Her stance wasn't confrontational. It was deferential, protective even. Tasha had taken a full step back, not just physically but emotionally, retreating from the moment, from the mistake, from the mirror now held up in front of her. Ellena placed the black folder gently on the gate counter. Then she opened it all the way. Inside, 6 printed documents, each in plastic sleeves, each with embossed gold seals and multi-agency signatures. The one on top read, Holloway Strategic Holdings, Concourse Operational Acquisition Summary. The paragraph below was clear, bold, and brutal. Pursuant to Federal Transport Oversight Section 14C, Holloway Strategic Holdings maintains full operational veto power over vendor, security, boarding, and personnel protocol within Concourse C, inclusive of all commercial airlines operating therein. This clause shall remain enforceable until revoked in writing by the Oversight Committee of Transportation Affairs with concurrence from the majority board of Holloway Holdings. Tasha leaned in, reading it without meaning to. Her lips parted slightly. Craig blinked once. Then again. That can't be real, he said under his breath. Camille looked at him. Do you want to test that theory? Ellena said nothing. She simply turned the page. Second document. A signed internal memo from the airline's parent company, marked confidential across the top. Effective July 1.22XX, Miss Ellena Grace Holloway will be granted physical access credentials and decision-making jurisdiction at all Holloway Holdings licensed properties. She turned to Craig. You knew none of this? She asked. Craig didn't answer. She waited a moment, then answered herself. No, you didn't. Because when you saw me at that scanner, you didn't look for information. You looked for confirmation bias. Craig opened his mouth to defend himself, but Camille was already dialed. She spoke into her radio. Control, this is Officer Evans at Gate C11. I'm standing beside Ms. Ellena Holloway, Stakeholder Authority, confirming audit enforcement per Tier 1. Recommend reassignment for Gate Agents Monroe and Delano, pending review. There was a long pause. Then the response. Acknowledged. Standing by for executive clearance to begin personnel lockout. Lockout. The word hit Craig like cold water. He turned to Ellena, voice low now, almost pleading. Look, I didn't know. If I had known, I'd have treated this completely differently. Ellena raised her hand. He stopped. You mean, she said, voice smooth, if I had looked like an owner, you'd have behaved like an employee. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was heavy. Ellena turned back to Camille. I'd like boarding resumed, she said, under new management. Then she added with perfect control, and going forward, all executive tier customers are to be validated by protocol, not appearance. Camille gave one sharp nod. Yes, ma'am. Jaden's phone buzzed. Not once, not twice. It vibrated off the armrest and nearly hit the floor. His live stream, now reposted by 3 activist accounts and 2 regional news blogs, had crossed 50,000 views in under 20 minutes. One clip, just 6 seconds long, showed Ellena lifting a single finger to silence Craig. That moment had been looped, captioned, and memed. This ain't a scene. This is a stand. Don't argue with the audit. Ms. Holloway didn't raise her voice. She raised the building. A CNN affiliate was now camped just outside the TSA checkpoint, holding a handheld mic and whispering into the camera, trying to piece together what had just happened. The headline on their feed read, Black woman denied first class. Turns out she owns the terminal. A local station ran a ticker that said, Audit triggered by stakeholder, gate shutdown linked to discrimination incident. Ellena hadn't called the press. She hadn't called anyone. But justice didn't need to beg for attention. It simply had to exist long enough for the world to see it. Camille now stood to the side of the gate desk, watching uniformed agents arrive, not to remove Ellena, but to take direction. A new supervisor in a burgundy tie and silver name tag introduced himself quickly, eyes alert but respectful. Ms. Holloway, I've been assigned by corporate compliance to ensure your boarding resumes smoothly. I've also been asked to express a formal apology on behalf of... Ellena raised a hand. Don't offer me a sentence someone else wrote, she said. He hesitated, nodded. You're right. She didn't smile, but she didn't shut him down either. Meanwhile, in the boarding area, the crowd had shifted. People were no longer watching her. They were watching each other. 2 middle-aged women in yoga pants who had earlier whispered about entitled passengers now sat silently, eyes down. A tech executive who'd smirked at Jaden earlier was now tapping through articles on his tablet, learning too late whose name he'd almost rolled his eyes at. And in the far back row, a grandmother in a purple headwrap nodded slowly to herself. She ain't raised her voice once, she said, half to her neighbor, half to herself. That's the kind of power they don't teach in school. Jaden tapped out one final tweet before putting his phone away. They tried to unseat a black woman who already owned the chairs. 12:02 p.m. Conference Room 3B, upstairs from the terminal. A space normally reserved for vendor presentations and boring budget talks was now packed. 3 senior managers, a regional operations officer, 2 legal observers from the airline's general counsel, and Ellena Grace Holloway. She didn't take the seat at the head of the table. She stood, bag closed, documents in hand. A woman beside her, wearing a slate gray suit and earpiece, whispered something brief, then stepped back. Julian Scott had arrived. He stood silently behind Ellena, tablet in hand, eyes sharp as glass. The director of terminal operations, a man named Gregory Vance, cleared his throat. "Miss Holloway," he began, "let me first say—" "I'm not here for apologies," Ellena said. Her voice wasn't raised, but the room quieted like a switch had flipped. "I'm here to ask 5 questions," she continued. "You don't need to answer them now, but you will answer them on the record." She placed 5 printed sheets on the table. Each had one question in bold, followed by blank space. She read aloud, 1. What protocols exist to prevent racially biased assumptions by frontline boarding agents? 2. What is the appeals process for a boarding dispute when the passenger is right but the staff disagrees? 3. Who holds final decision authority when 2 systems, digital and human, are in conflict? 4. What is the measurable standard of professional conduct when it comes to verifying first-class passengers? 5. What are the consequences when those standards are not met? Publicly and repeatedly, no one spoke. Ellena looked around the room. Calm, patient, then added, "These aren't theoretical. These aren't just for me. They're for every traveler who has ever had to prove their humanity before proving their ticket." Julian stepped forward and connected a cable from his tablet to the monitor in the room. An interface lit up. Not airline software, it was Holloway Holdings' own audit system. Real-time data, time-stamped interactions, video playback from Gate C11, transcripts from Gate audio logs. Not one word was doctored, not 1 second edited. Gregory leaned forward. "How did you get that footage?" Ellena didn't answer right away. Julian did. "Ms. Holloway's company manages the physical infrastructure of this terminal. That includes the camera system. You consented to data sharing in your own contract." Another silence. Ellena turned toward the monitor. She pressed play. The screen showed the exact moment Craig had stepped in front of her. Then the moment Tasha dismissed her boarding pass without scanning it. Then the moment Craig said, "Let's not make this difficult." When the clip ended, Ellena looked at the room again, then said calmly, "Tell me, did I make it difficult?" No one answered. She reached into her bag again, pulled out a second folder. "This is my proposal," she said. She passed it across the table. "Effective immediately, Holloway Holdings will require all airline partners to undergo quarterly bias training, pre-clearance reconciliation audits, and install escalation tracking AI at boarding gates, if they wish to maintain license access to our terminals." One of the legal observers opened the folder. His eyebrows rose. Another manager asked, "You're proposing this for just your terminals?" "No," Ellena said. "I'm proposing this for every terminal where a black woman paid for a seat and was told she didn't look like she belonged in it." Julian added softly, "And we own 26 of them." Gregory Vance sat back in his chair. "This'll take months to approve," he said. "No," Ellena replied. "It'll take until tomorrow morning, because I already drafted the addendum. The only thing left is your signature, and then, with quiet finality, if you don't sign it, we'll release the full internal audit. Every second, every name." By the time the evening news rolled in, Ellena Holloway's name was no longer just trending, it was everywhere. Not just on the live streams, not just in think pieces and op-eds, but in union meetings, in corporate Slack threads, and in a living room on the south side of Chicago, where 5 women in their 70s sat watching the clip of her saying, "From this moment forward, I am the one giving instructions." One of them, Miss Alberta, held her teacup midair and said, without looking away, she didn't even blink. Another, her cousin Della, nodded slowly. She didn't have to. That's what happens when you already paid the bills in the room. Back at the airport, Gate C11 had resumed boarding. A new set of staff stood behind the counter, professional, focused, nervous. No one asked passengers to re-verify anything. No one rechecked boarding passes unless the scanner told them to. And Ellena? She boarded last, not because she was delayed, but because she chose to. Jaden watched from row 6 as she walked down the jet bridge. When she passed him, she nodded once. Not a smile, just recognition. Not thank you for filming, just you saw what needed to be seen. By the next day, 4 airlines had issued internal memos. 2 had announced plans for revised bias training. 1 had pulled an entire vendor contract pending review. And the FAA? They said nothing publicly, but they scheduled a closed-door policy session for emergency passenger trust concerns. Ellena didn't post about it, didn't do a press tour, didn't tweet. But Julian received 15 speaking invitation offers in her name. 3 from equity conferences, 4 from investment boards, 1 from a White House advisor. She turned them all down. I wasn't performing, she told him. I was correcting. Across the country, conversations bloomed. At hair salons in Atlanta, at church brunches in Baltimore, at union halls in Detroit. People weren't just talking about the moment, they were retelling it, word for word. Not because she yelled, but because she didn't have to. Because she stood still while the room shifted around her. And because when power knocked at the wrong door, she opened it from the inside. The seat was warm, not from the sun, but from the weight of presence. Seat 1A, first class, window side. Ellena sat down slowly. No applause, no flashbulbs, no fanfare, just quiet and space. She placed her bag gently under the seat in front of her, took out a small notebook, leather-bound, a little frayed at the edges. She didn't open it right away, just held it. A flight attendant approached, a pillar, younger, nervous, but kind-eyed. "Miss Holloway," she said softly, "can I get you anything?" Ellena looked up, warmly. "A glass of water," she said, "no ice." The attendant nodded, but didn't leave right away. "I just wanted to say thank you. My mother, she's a porter at Reagan Airport. She texted me." Ellena nodded, said nothing, but the young woman smiled anyway, as if the silence was all the permission she needed. When she left, Ellena opened the notebook. On the inside cover in black ink was a line. "Your seat is wherever you decide to sit. The rest is paperwork." She didn't remember who first said it. Maybe it was her grandmother. Maybe she said it to herself in a different airport a long time ago, when she still wore borrowed blazers and flew standby. Outside the window, the runway shimmered in the heat. In her mind, she could still hear Tasha's voice, cold and clipped. "You'll need to step aside. That seat's reserved for executive titanium." She could still feel the moment she chose not to argue, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't come to argue. She came to remind the system. Some of us don't ask twice. The captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 261. We'll be pushing back in just a few moments." A pause. Then something unexpected. The voice continued. "And to our passenger in seat 1A, we thank you for the reminder that dignity doesn't have to shout." Jaden, 2 rows behind, looked up. Passengers all over the cabin looked up. But Ellena? She didn't flinch. She turned to the window, watched the tarmac slowly begin to move, and whispered, just to herself, "I didn't come here to fly." She smiled. "I came here to land." There's something powerful about a woman who doesn't raise her voice, because she never needed to. Ellena Holloway didn't show up to prove anything. She showed up to take her seat and remind the world that presence alone, when grounded in truth and legacy, can silence entire systems. For so many of us, especially Black women of a certain generation, we've been told to be patient, polite, and quiet when treated unfairly. But this story is a reminder that you don't have to perform rage to be heard. You just need to own the room. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of a time you were overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your story, like if you felt seen. Share with someone who needs to be reminded of their power. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because we've got more stories that don't just entertain, they empower.